Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Nau mai, haere mai, welcome to the Early Childhood Seminar Series. We'll begin our time together with karakia. Me enoi tātou. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa ponamu te moana. Hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. Haumi e, hui e, tae ki e. Thank you for joining us for today's presentation by Dr. Daniel Lovatt from Te Rito Maiaha, Early Childhood New Zealand. It is a pleasure to have Daniel here with us today to share his research on theorising working theories and the role that kaiako will take in mediating children's working theories. I know this session will be enlightening and inspiring. If any questions arise for you during the presentation that you would like to ask Daniel, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and he will respond to them at the end of his presentation. You can also use the chat function throughout the presentation to connect with each other and with the panelists. And after the seminar, recording will be available on our Early Childhood Seminar Series YouTube channel. So I have the privilege today of formally introducing Daniel and sharing a little bit more about his professional and research path in early childhood education. So over 20 years ago, Daniel completed his first degree, a Bachelor of Engineering, majoring in electrical and electronic engineering. And after working as an electrician and electrical engineer, he completed a graduate diploma of teaching in early childhood education here at the University of Auckland in 2010. This led to him working as an early childhood kaiako in private early childhood centres and then at Mangere Bridge Kindergarten. And while he was working as a kaiako, Daniel completed his master's degree and then he went on to complete his doctorate as a full-time student. Daniel's master's and doctoral research have focused on young children's working theories, specifically how these develop and evolve and ways that teachers can support the development and refinement of children's working theories. Following completion of his doctorate, Daniel worked as a head kaiako and then as the curriculum leader for a non-profit early childhood service in Auckland. And at the beginning of this year, Daniel moved to the very beautiful Nelson to take up the role of Regional Education Leader for Te Rito Maiaha, Early Childhood New Zealand. Through his research, teaching and PLD courses, Daniel continues to make valuable contributions to the early childhood sector, and he has been a long-time friend and supporter of the Early Childhood Seminar Series. We're delighted to have Daniel here with us to share this presentation on theorising working theories, mediators of teaching and learning. Nau mai, haere mai, Daniel. Welcome, over to you.
Kia ora, Justine. Thank you for a very beautiful and humbling introduction. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora whānau. Ko te ara puera toko maunga, ko te manukau nukatanga o Aotearoa toko moana, ko Dennis Lovatt toko mātua, ko Jeanette Lovatt toko whaia, ko Alison, ko Ali o ko tamariki, ko Marissa toko wahine, ko Daniel Lovatt toko ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora whānau. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to share some more of my research with you. As you might have seen, I've presented on working theories previously, drawing on my doctorate to present the model of working theory development and the shared learning commitment model. Today, I want to go deeper into working theories. As the title indicates, I'll be arguing that working theories can be viewed as mediators of learning and therefore as mediators of further working theories. I hope that by the end of the presentation, you will see that there is significant depth to the concept of working theories and that they are far more than simply young children's ideas and understandings. As I move into working theories being mediators, I also want to touch on the idea that there has been an outcry for some time that internationally there is a crisis of curriculum and that working theories can address that crisis. So we've got plenty to cover in the next half hour or so. There are 6 sections in this presentation. First, I'll provide a quick introduction and overview of working theories. Next, I'll explain my threefold perspective of working theories. Then I'll introduce and provide a quick overview of mediation and how that fits with working theories. We'll then move into a short vignette, which I'll follow up with analysis through a working theories as mediator perspective. And finally, we'll tackle the whole idea of what does this mean. But before I move on, I'd like to say a big thank you to some people who have helped me to get to where I am. First, to Professor Helen Hedges, who's been kind, generous, encouraging and challenging. We connected when I did my graduate diploma way back in 2008, and she has been supporting me ever since. Ngā mihi, Helen, thank you so much. Also to Dr. Rena Heap, who together with Helen supervised my PhD. Thank you, Rena, for being challenging but encouraging, for critiquing my work but doing it in such a kind and uplifting way. Ngā mihi. And to the two early childhood centres and the wonderful teachers, children and families with whom I researched together during my PhD. Thank you so much. Ngā mihi. For some time now, both nationally and internationally, there have been calls that there is a crisis of curriculum. The basis for this call is a tension between a knowledge-based or process-based curriculum. Historically, curriculum has been focused on knowledge. That is, learning facts, gaining knowledge about certain areas or domains of the world. This, of course, begs some questions. Who decides what knowledge is deemed worthy of being included in curriculum? Should everyone everywhere be learning the same knowledge? And how do we set up our tamariki to be successful in a world that is changing at an ever-increasing pace, where facts and knowledge are becoming more accessible all the time? In general, there's been a movement towards a more process-focused curriculum, again nationally and internationally. And of course, tamariki is one example of a process-focused curriculum, which does not prescribe the facts and knowledge that tamariki must be taught and which they might even learn. Instead, tamariki provides a framework within which kaiako, whānau, and tamariki negotiate and develop curriculum together. This type of curriculum has been facing criticism for a number of years now, particularly in that there has been a perceived lack of focus on subject content knowledge. The criticism sits around a focus on tamariki developing generic soft skills rather than holding any specific knowledge. In fact, Jerome Bruner warned us about the risks involved in a process-focused curriculum in the 1960s, saying that this focus risked the development of self-confident fools, meaning children that thought that they could find out anything they needed, but actually had no substantive subject knowledge. Ideally, curriculum involves both process and outcome, enabling tamariki to learn and develop the skills and knowledge to learn, while also developing knowledge and understandings about the world. Well, it's your lucky day today, because if we consider working theories from a mediational lens, working theories can be a way to navigate the tension between a knowledge-based and process-based curriculum crisis. Before we look into that any further, though, let's quickly overview what working theories are. Working theories are the tentative, evolving ideas and understandings that children develop as they use their existing knowledge and understandings to make sense of new information. For instance, a young child pointed out to me that brown cows produce chocolate milk. To that child, and based on their experiences and information, that made total sense. It was their current working theory. Over time, as they gain further information, they'll most likely revise that working theory. Scientists also develop working theories, but they don't normally refer to them as working and present them instead as an endpoint. For instance, when I was at school, gravity was presented as a constant number depending on the mass of objects. Only now we've discovered that actually gravity might not be as fixed and constant as previously thought, because scientists have discovered these things called gravitational waves. What was once accepted is being called into question. Can you see that just as tamariki rely on their understandings, their experiences and information to theorize that brown cows produce chocolate milk, the understandings, experience and information that scientists had led to their old working theory about gravity. Now, though, new information is requiring their old theory to be revised. The concept of working theories is based on Te view that children are competent, capable, and creative. Therefore, young children are competent, capable, and creative working theorizers. At first, the concept of working theories appear quite simple. They are evolving ideas and understandings, but if you look a little deeper, the concept is very complex. Think about these aspects of working theories. They are evolving ideas, evolving understandings. They are developed by children, but actually also by adults. The children use their existing knowledge. They are about making sense, and they are a mixture of knowledge, of skills, of attitudes, and in the original version of tamariki, of strategies and of expectations. Working theories have been recognised as a neglected learning outcome beside learning dispositions of tamariki. Yet learning dispositions and working theories are interdependent. For example, if you're curious about something, you'll likely develop working theories about it, and these working theories might make you even more curious. Working theories and learning dispositions can therefore be considered as two sides of the same coin. So why should we focus on working theories? Well, for a start, Helen Hedges noted that working theories have connections with broader and more internationally renowned notions such as thinking and knowledge development. And as you already know, working theories are referenced in our early childhood curriculum, tamariki. They are an overarching learning outcome, along with learning dispositions, and they are a specific learning outcome. Over time, and with guidance and encouragement, children become increasingly capable of making sense of their worlds by generating and refining working theories. Importantly, from a crisis of curriculum perspective, as I've already stated, working theories can navigate that tension between process and outcome, or generic skills and knowledge-focused curriculum. Okay, now we'll move into some theorising. This is my perspective on working theories. I consider working theories to be threefold. That is, they are a process, an outcome, and an interpretive framework for processing further working theories. First, let's look at the process and outcome. The notion of a working theory is both a noun and a verb, or the forming and the formed. Just as we are engaging in the process of forming a working theory, we have formed that working theory. The process and the outcome can't be separated. For instance, think about a young child learning to throw a ball. They have very likely observed other children and perhaps adults do it already, so they've developed some basic working theories through observation. Now they are ready to throw the ball themselves. Let's assume they have a ball in their hand. To start with, they probably stand straight, hold the arm with the ball in it upright, and bend that arm at the elbow, moving their hand and the ball forward. And if they happen to open their fingers and let go of the ball too early, it will likely fall behind their shoulder. If they let go too late, the ball is likely to just land straight down towards their feet. But if they happen to open their fingers at the right time, the ball will be thrown forward. Let's think about that from a process and outcome perspective. The child is developing working theories about how to throw a ball. The process involves developing a hypothesis about how to throw a ball. Then trial, error, and evaluation, which together we might call a form of scientific experimentation, takes place. The outcome, perhaps after multiple experiments, is that I need to open my fingers at the right time for the ball to be thrown forward as I move my arm. Now let's add the third perspective of working theories, the interpretive framework, or the bottom section of that triangle. At the same time as being involved in the process and outcome of working theory development, the child is also developing and using an interpretive framework, which likely is the way I use my body controls how far and where the ball goes. To begin with, that framework guides and interprets the child's working theories about throwing in a simple way. I have to move my arm and open my fingers. However, over time, that framework will then lead to the child developing further working theory outcomes. That it's not just opening my fingers, it's using my whole arm and my shoulder. It's about twisting my body, the angle of my arm, the speed of my arm, where I aim, etc. Importantly, it is the interpretive framework aspect which is the foundation of the working theory. The interpretive framework is both a foundation and a way of making sense of the new information gathered every time the child throws the ball. As I said, the process and the outcome cannot be separated, and furthermore, the interpretive filter cannot be separated either. Working theories can then be viewed from this threefold perspective. Now let's move on to mediation. Mediation is a complex theoretical construct that sits within socio-cultural theory. At its most general, mediation involves an influence, which is called a mediator or mediating artifact, in the interaction between two objects, events, or people. Another triangle, which you can see on your screen, this time the mediational triangle, shows how mediation can be considered. In essence, a person's action towards, their relation to, or understanding of an object can be either mediated or natural, and natural is also called unmediated. We can think of mediating artifacts as something that enables children or adults to make sense of new information within the social, cultural, and historical settings that they are in. The mediating artifact can be material, i.e. it might be a book, or it can be conceptual, i.e. it might be words spoken or existing understandings held by the subject. In terms of working theories, we can think of the subject as a child, perhaps a tamariki in our centres, or it could even be the adults, the kaiako in our centres. The object is something that the child, children, or adults are trying to make sense of. It might be a concept, which then includes working theories, or it might be some sort of material or resource such as building blocks. For example, in my research, I watched jelly being made at an early childhood centre, then later analysed it from a mediational perspective. In short, a child had been at a jelly making experience and moved away for a short time. She returned shortly afterwards with a magnifying glass. A teacher commented that the child had brought the magnifying glass to make sure the jelly crystals were all stirred in and dissolved. The teacher noted that using the magnifying glass would show if there were any lumps in the mixture, because lumps meant that there were still crystals in the mixture that needed to be dissolved. The mediational triangle can be used to theorise this experience. In this case, the children were the subject, and the object was the concept of jelly crystals dissolving. The mediating artifact was the teacher's words spoken to help the children make sense of the term dissolving. Of course, there are many other mediational perspectives that we could consider this vignette from as well. For instance, the magnifying glass could be the mediating artifact, but unfortunately, we're not going to have time to go into alternative perspectives today. Now remember back to the working theories triangle, which theorises working theories as process, outcome, and interpretive framework. Each of these three aspects can be considered to be conceptual. The process involves concepts that enable working theories to be formed. The outcome can be considered as a working theory that is being formed, and the interpretive framework can be considered as a conceptual framework that enables us to filter new information, to develop new understandings, and therefore refined working theories. From this perspective, working theories as a process, outcome, and interpretive framework can then be viewed as mediating artifacts. They can act as an influence on how we consider an object, person, or item, as we have existing working theories about them that can then influence further understandings or working theories that we develop about them. Let's take a look at a short vignette and then analyse it from this perspective. This vignette comes from another centre where I carried out research during my PhD. Due to ethical requirements, I can't name the centre or children or teachers, but to provide a little context, it is a privately run centre in Auckland with a very diverse mix of children and teachers. It is a mixed age, meaning that all the children from 6 months to 5 years are together throughout the day. In my research, I videoed the children and often was involved to some extent in what was going on. In this instance, some children were standing under the climbing frame trying to reach the bars. They tried stretching, standing on their toes, then jumping, but while some could touch the bar, no one could hold on to it. Next, they tried running down the nearby hill and jumping, but it still didn't help. Then they noticed some nearby foam wedges and decided to try them out. The following vignette shows a very small part of that experience.
Ooh.
No, it's not kicking this.
Whoa!
Throw the ball to the back. Come over here. And you stand there and you can throw the ball. Yeah. Get it. Whoa! Good building. Stand over here, John. Oh, nice work.
He's
You know that spatial thing?
oh, okay.
Oh.
I'm actually going to play that for a second time, and what I want you to concentrate this time on is where that child who's jumping from the wedge places his feet on the wedge and what happens.
Ooh.
No, it's not kicking this.
Whoa!
Throw the ball to the back. Come over here. And you stand there and you can throw the ball. Yeah. Get it. Whoa! Good building. Stand over here, John. Oh, nice work.
He's
You know that spatial thing?
oh, okay.
Oh.
I've watched that vignette, I don't know how many times, and each time I'm sure I pick up something new. Today was the angle of the body of the young boy who was running down the hill. When he hits the wedge, he seems to have developed a working theory about how to position the angle of his body to not tip that wedge over after a few tries. But you know, this seemingly simple experience, running down a hill and jumping off a foam wedge, covers multiple curriculum areas and working theories about many domains, such as maths with geometry and distance, science with speed and force, relationships with turn-taking and encouragement, and empowerment with the children taking responsibility for their learning. Let's have a look at Frank's working theories about jumping from the wedge, and let's start with his initial understanding. The wedge is going to help me reach the bars. We can think of that as his interpretive framework on the triangle or the threefold model of working theories. He tries it out. He runs down the hill, lands on the wedge, but then finds that the position on which he lands on the wedge is important. You might have noticed in the first 2 attempts, he actually falls off the wedge. At the same time, he knows that if he's too low, he can't reach the bars, as later on we see him land low on the wedge and then step up higher before launching off the wedge to the monkey bars. The interpretive framework, weaved together with his processing of the information gained from experimentation, leads to an outcome. Where I land on the wedge matters. Together, all 3 aspects form his working theory. He repeats his trial many times. Even after the video was turned off, he continued to. Each time, he then processes the new information gained, still using the interpretive filter to develop a new outcome and to refine his working theory. In this case, the physical experience supported the development of working theories that were becoming conceptually accurate, even though Frank likely could not explain what his working theories were in terms of physics and maths. Let's add the threefold view of Frank's developing working theories about using the wedge onto the triangle of mediation. As I discussed earlier, the threefold view of working theories as process, outcome, and interpretive framework can be considered as a mediating artifact. The working theories which Frank was developing about the function of the wedge mediated his use of the wedge and mediated his understanding of how the wedge functioned itself. As he experimented by using the wedge, Frank's working theories about the wedge were then modified. His interpretive framework acted as mediator by underpinning his understanding that the wedge was useful for gaining height and reaching the monkey bars. The process of forming the working theories through experimentation mediated his understandings, and the understandings formed mediated the modification of further working theories as he experimented further. The understandings enriched Frank's interpretive framework, which mediated the new information he gained from subsequent experiences. Frank's working theories therefore acted as mediating artifacts about the function of the wedge. Frank's experience with jumping from the wedge can be viewed as a process, an outcome, and interpretive filter. He's using an informal, scientific, experimental process to develop working theories. At this stage, Frank's working theories were based on real-life experience. However, a teacher could introduce aspects of gravity, talk about pivot points, perhaps even relating them to seesaws, and introduce concepts from the domain of physics or mathematics. Over time, as Frank engages in formal learning at school, he will be introduced to vectors and forces, and I suggest that because of his real-life learning about such things, it will be much easier for him to understand the theory behind it all. In fact, this is something Vygotsky argued when he wrote about informal and formal learning. Over time, Frank will also be introduced to the scientific process of experimentation, and again I suggest that the theory will make much more sense to him because he has used the process in real life. Working theories therefore involve learning how to learn and the knowledge that comes from developing the working theories themselves. If we accept that working theories act as mediating artifacts, we can then understand children's working theories in deeper ways. It can be easy to accept that children and adults think a particular way or hold existing working theories because they have seen something in a book or have been told something by a peer or adult. To me, that makes sense. However, it's harder, for me anyway, to understand that working theories also act as mediating artifacts, as they can be much more difficult to see and to understand. Yet, as I've argued, working theories do indeed act as mediating artefacts of further working theory development. Let's go all the way back to brown cows producing chocolate milk. In this instance, the child's working theories were that cows produce milk and that chocolate milk is brown. From the mediational triangle, the subject is then the child and the object is the production of chocolate milk. The child holds working theories that cows produce milk and that chocolate milk is brown. These working theories mediated that child's working theories about cows and chocolate milk. It is only fair, in my opinion, that if a child holds those working theories and sees a brown cow, that they would then mediate their understanding that a brown cow produces brown chocolate milk. Perhaps we would go so far as to say that this working theory is naive. But then over time, perhaps we might go back and look at scientists' understandings and theorizing of gravity as being a constant and say that that was naive too. What is true in both instances is that the child and scientists' understandings and working theories about milk and gravity were and are mediated by the working theories they currently hold. Understanding working theories as mediating artifacts can provide insights into why young children, and adults too, understand the world as they do. We can develop a deeper appreciation of children's working theories as process, outcome, and interpretive framework, and know that working theories act to mediate understandings and working theories about the world as they know it. Furthermore, we can then understand that one child's working theories can then act as a mediating artifact on their peers' working theories as they interact together. Finally, we can also appreciate that our own working theories as kaiako also mediate our understandings and developing working theories about the way we teach and learn together with our tamariki. As much as I'm tempted to also talk about this aspect of working theories and mediation, I'll save that for another day. Thank you all for your time. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Daniel. That was, as always, very interesting. And I am still processing things, but I have questions, and I'm sure that other people will also have questions. So please, if anybody does have questions, ask them in the Q&A, and I will pose them to Daniel on your behalf. But while we get to that point, while people are still gathering their thoughts, I have a few things that I would like to kind of, I guess, ask about. So the research into children's working theories in early childhood settings tells us that teachers do require both subject knowledge and knowledge of pedagogical strategies to support inquiry learning. And I guess this is more of a comment actually than a question at the moment, but the current proposed regulatory changes around teacher qualifications will undoubtedly have implications for the subject content knowledge and knowledge of pedagogical strategies for those working in the early childhood sector. And the research literature also states that a curriculum for working theories is not about rushing children towards accurate concepts and knowledge. And I must admit, I'm quite happy for kids to think that brown cows make chocolate milk. I love that theory. And I wouldn't want to rush them on from that, but we need to be allowing that conceptual development to be achieved over time and in indirect ways. So we need to be allowing time for those deepened conversations and reflection that draws out children's existing understandings, as well as having varied experiences and interactions with multiple others so that they can actually mediate each other's working theories. So here's the question finally. On a practical level, do you have any suggestions for how kaiako can find or create that time to have those deep conversations and reflection with children that support the development and evolution of working theories?
Wow, thank you, Justine. There's a lot to process there too.
Why?
You know, it so often comes back to time and space, doesn't it? You know, and it's of course not as simple as that, because you can't just create time and you can't create space out of nowhere. So it's using the time and the space that you have to engage deeply with your tamariki. to me, it's about understanding your tamariki, where they come from, how they have developed that knowledge, what is mediating further understandings. And to do that, I can't see that there's any other way but by developing deep relationships with those children and their whānau to understand them better. So it's going to take time. And yeah, time, and that's a good thing. Taking time is a good thing. We don't need to rush it, but we do need to be prioritizing it and not letting it just slip by. So when I say it's going to take time, I mean it's going to take, a period of time. But within that period of time, you need to be making that, the development of those relationships, the understanding of the children's understandings a priority so that you can go deeper.
Absolutely. And I think it is that very much that thing of that often as we get to know our children and their whānau better, we actually get insights into what those children's working theories might be about the world, because we learn more about what they know about, what their whānau know about, and seeing how they might be applying those understandings to the situations that they're coming across in the early childhood setting.
That's right. That's when you have those aha moments.
Yeah, which is so exciting, when you're like, I get now why you are doing these things, and you're putting those pieces of information together.
Yeah. And so, one of the things, though, that I'm trying to argue here is it's not just thinking, sometimes we think, why is such and such in the sandpit baking, and then they're at the Play-Doh table baking and all of that. We're noticing something across different mediums. And so we talk to their whānau, and we find out that actually someone significant to them is a baker. And that can be an aha moment. But what I'm trying to say is we need to go deeper now, because there are working theories that this child is developing and in the process and has developed that are going to explain these things as well. And they're going to be different for every child, but it's trying to understand what those working theories are that will help us to go even deeper than what we do.
Yeah. Getting beyond that sort of superficial interest, and actually what are the child's questions and ideas.
That's right.
About. So I guess the next thing that I was going to ask about was, do you have any suggestions for how kaiako can achieve, I think it's a very fine balance between actively challenging disruptive children's thinking to kind of create that disequilibrium that I know you've talked about in other places, which encourages children to revise or test their theories, while at the same time being careful that as kaiako we don't position children as wrong, or perhaps lower their self-esteem or inhibit their desire to develop a richer or more complex working theory?
Yeah, great question, Justine. And, that takes me back to my master's research. And I remember investigating that idea of disequilibrium, where we introduce something deliberately that's going to disrupt a child's working theory or idea that they're holding. And it is quite complex, but there are some things which I think are like a foundation. And again, it comes down to relationship. How often do you hear a child say, well, brown cows create brown milk because my mum told me, so they're talking about someone that they have a really good relationship with. And I think, again, if we can develop that, then there's going to be a certain amount of trust that they have in us, and they're going to be interested in us and what we have to say in whatever way that is. What I've tried to do and what I did in my research is not come up to a child and say, actually, you're wrong. Instead, it's more about a gentle introduction of an alternative point of view. Or often I would use the words, I wonder what would happen if such and such. And particularly if you're in a group of children, then you're going to have all sorts of perspectives presented. And at the same time, as I say, I try to be very gentle. Generally, when you're in a group of children, you're going to get very strong opinions, and they will just come out and say, no, you're wrong. And at the same time, here am I trying to facilitate a gentle movement in thinking and working theory. So there's a bit of a disconnect there, but it seems to me that young children can accept that challenge better from their peers than they might do from adults.
Yeah, and I think again it comes back to that ability to have those pedagogical strategies to support children in how they question each other and challenge each other's thinking. At the same time as, getting them to maybe ask questions of each other, like, oh, okay, so when you did it, this happened, but when your friend here did the same thing, something different happened. I wonder why that was.
That's right. Yeah. And if anybody ever reads my article in Early Childhood Folio about hearts, I talk about a young girl who had a working theory, and I challenged it gently and then just left it, and deliberately left it, but kept on mulling it over. And a couple of days later, she came back to me and she had revised her working theory because she'd gone home and she had mulled it over too and continued to think about it and talked to her mum in particular. And together they had worked their way through what that working theory was. And in this case, it became much more conceptually accurate. Not that the aim was that that would happen. For me, it was more about the challenge of the thinking process.
So in that instance, would it be fair to say that mum's voice was the mediating artifact? Or would that be, have I got that kind of wrong?
Yeah, because there are multiple ways to look at mediation. You can move the subject and the object and the mediating artifact around the triangle, actually. And one way that you could view the child's refined working theory was that she was a subject. She held a working theory about a particular thing, which was the object. And at a certain time, her mum worked as the mediating artifact and helped her to develop a refined working theory about that. You could also say that this particular child held a working theory already, which underpinned her the way that she thought about the particular object, and that became the mediating artifact. So a person can be a mediating artifact, and the current working theory buried deep within your brain can also be the mediating artifact.
Yeah, it's very metacognitive, isn't it? That thinking about our own thinking.
That's right.
Yeah. So thinking about how that child in particular used their parent as another person to collaborate with and develop their working theory with, do you have any kind of suggestions for how we can make the development and documentation of working theories more collaborative? How can we extend the discussion and evolution of working theories across a wider learning community, including other children and teachers and family members?
Yeah, again, you're into complex areas, Justine, because there are, I remember in that same research I did, there was a desire from some parents that their children would hold conceptually accurate working theories. And so there automatically becomes tension then between the enactment of curriculum for us as kaiako and the expectations of the whānau. And I think Helen might have written about this actually. It was to do with shark skin and cartilage and bones. And this particular child said that they'd felt their ears and various other things, and eventually they had come to the working theory that their ears had bones in them. That actually wasn't acceptable to their parents. As kaiako, we should have been teaching them that that's not the case and that there's cartilage involved. And over time, that might have been the way, but this child, just went home after that long conversation and period of time working that out and told his parents, and they weren't particularly happy about that. So then it became our role to explain the nature of working theory development in Aotearoa, New Zealand. In terms of documentation, that's something that needs a lot more research. There's been so much produced in terms of learning dispositions, but very little about how to document children's working theories and that change over time. So if anybody's watching and has a great deal of money, I'll gratefully accept it and do some research about that.
Yeah, because this is something that I've been thinking about, certainly in my own work with children, is because I guess as kaiako people working with children, we recognise that the progression of working theories might involve sort of sometimes going backwards in order to go forwards. It might spiral around on itself. There's emotions, there's creativity, there's and things don't always happen in a logical sequence in the way that children's working theories develop. So yeah, thinking about documenting the evolution of a working theory, often we don't even realize that children are developing a working theory until we're sort of several steps down the track and we've actually realized that they've changed their thinking about something. So I think Roskill South Kindergarten have done some work previously about stories of interest, where they actually recognize that sometimes they pick up on the interest several steps down the track, and so they go back and document retrospectively how children have developed that interest, or that and in many ways it is about the working theories that they've developed. But have you, I guess it's that idea of how do we go about documenting and making visible that development of children's working theories over time, and us as kaiako being alert to those.
Yeah, the first thing I'd say is that in tamariki, there is no mention of the need for working theories to be conceptually accurate. So they can be fantastical and creative, as we know that our children can do. They haven't been squeezed into that box yet. So their thinking and their theorising is amazingly creative, and that's something to be celebrated. In terms of documenting that evolution, I don't have an answer to that in full, but one of the things I think we can do is start to pull working theories apart to show the importance and the complexity of them in our documentation. So one of the things I've been looking at is developing tables that show various parts of working theories, which I won't talk about tonight because we've already theorised enough, but it's a way that you can talk about the information, understanding the way that they've made sense of things, and show that actually the development of their working theory isn't just a light bulb moment as such, but there's a lot going on to have got from a certain point to another point, and that process is really important, whether or not they've ended up at a conceptually accurate point or not.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking just of some of the things that when we sort of started first learning about the work that was coming out of Reggio Emilia and the children's artistic depictions of some of their working theories or their ideas about, I just remember one in particular about, where does rain come from? And, children had a whole variety of different theories about where rain came from, but again, mediated through their own life experiences and the prior knowledge that they had. And so, for some children who maybe had a faith base, that they would, it was about God was watering his flowers, whereas other children had a whole lot of other different theories. So that idea of that kete of knowledge that children, those funds of knowledge that children come to us with, being so important in mediating their development of their working theories. In the right language there, Daniel?
Yeah, and yet what a wonderful question to ask. I wonder where rain comes from. Ask at the right moment with the right group of children. I think you know, there are a whole lot of questions that can be asked like that, just to prompt some of that working theory development.
Yeah. And yeah, and just getting that sharing of ideas going. I mean, for me personally, that's one of the great joys of working with children, is hearing those ideas and then kind of thinking about where have these understandings come from? How have you put that together? That's so fascinating. Daniel, I've asked you pretty much all of the things that I had thought about asking. I'm not sure if anybody in our audience has got anything further that they would like to ask you, but is there anything that I haven't asked you that you wanted to make sure that we talked about?
I would like to suggest to watch my previous working theories webinar with
Yes.
the University of Auckland Early Childhood Seminar Series, because that might help some of this to become that little bit clearer. I think this is quite a theoretical way of thinking about working theories, and I'd suggest too that if you are a little confused and you do really want to work your way through this, watch the presentation again and pause it so that you can digest the bits and pieces at your leisure and at a pace that works for you.
Yeah, and so if you are looking for that, you can always just Google Daniel Lovatt flying sausages, and it will turn up, because it's
Thank you.
a combination of things to search for, but it will get you to Daniel's previous seminar for us, or you can look on the Early Childhood Seminar Series YouTube site. And we've had, so you can get those webinars by going to the Early Childhood Seminar Series YouTube channel. And somebody has commented that I found as a kaiako in the past that there are quieter times of days, such as when children are waiting to be picked up, that were great times for discussions about working theories with children. And certainly, yeah, that would be my experience as well. Those quieter lulls, sometimes during meal times or when you've just got a small group of children. But Daniel, do you have any other prime times?
I do think, you know, those wonderful times in the early morning when children are getting dropped off, and they come in with something that they've seen or something that's really of interest to them. And also, like you've just said, those quieter times as children are getting picked up. And lunch times, if you are able to, they are just the most amazing times to have wonderful discussions together at a table with children while they're eating. You've kind of got a captive audience for a little while. And they certainly have been times of great satisfaction and joy for me as we discuss things as a group while we're eating and developing those working theories together, building on each other's understandings. Yeah, those are the times that have really worked for me. But also just those other little times you'll find during the day, and in amongst perhaps some chaos that might be going on, there are times of stillness, and you know, those are the times to really be very deliberate and intentional about working theories.
And I think there's some of that language that you're just using then is, you know, there are so many things that we're bringing together as kaiako. So there's that intentional teaching, there's that, you know, responsive and respectful and reciprocal relationships where we're actually sharing ideas with children and not having to, although we do have subject and content knowledge, not having to be the holders of all knowledge, and
That's
to
right.
model that curiosity about the world is such an important skill for us as well.
Yeah. You know, I think knowledge can be quite dangerous because it can position us in a place of power, and that can really diminish the creation and refinement and development of working theories if we come in from a position of power and just say, well, actually, this is what happens. We undo a lot of that wonderful creativity and process of development.
Yeah, and I think what we're essentially doing at that point is just training children to wait for someone else to tell them the answer.
That's right.
Which is not the kind of humans I think that this world needs. We need people who are going to question and be curious and find out things for themselves. I think that is all the questions that we have. Daniel, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.
No, well, as always, thank you so much, Daniel, and thank you to our audience for your attention and for your contributions today. So Daniel, your presentation is a really important reminder of how working theories do engage children's thinking and their meaning making, and also getting deeper into that kind of theoretical constructs behind it that support knowledge construction and also support children in that early learning. Equally importantly, you have reminded us all of the important role that teachers play in responding to and extending children's working theory development. So ngā mihi nui ki a koe, Daniel. We are very appreciative of your time and your sharing of your research and experience, and I'm sure we will be inviting you back again for a part 3.
Yeah, right.
Early Childhood Seminar Series audience, if you wish to share or revisit this presentation, please check out our Early Childhood Seminar Series YouTube channel, where you can also find Daniel's previous presentation. And the recording of this seminar will be available in a couple of days on our channel. So we look forward to seeing you all back again for our next seminar in October. So keep an eye on your inbox for the flyer and registration information. Thank you again for joining us today. Thank you again, Daniel. So we'll close with a karakia. Me inoi tātou. Kia tau te rangi Māori o te rangi e tu iho nei. O papatua anuku i tā koto nei, o te tai ao e awhi nei. Ki runga ia tātou. Tihei Māori ora. May the peace of the sky above, of the earth below, of the all-embracing universe rest upon us all. Behold, it is life. Take good care, everyone. Ka kite anō.